Evan Bayliss and Steve Mayles, composer David Wise, and the game designer himself, Greg Mayles. Hello. Hello. I'm so excited. Can we begin by hearing what you did in the game? So, David, you start with on the panel. What did you do in the game?
I wrote a lot of the music for Donkey Kong Country 1.
What? Yeah, I designed pretty much most of the game. I did to build the Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong models. So.
I did most of the rest of the characters, not Donkey and Diddy, and all the animations.
Wow. So let's start at the beginning. How did the opportunity to work on Donkey Kong come about?
I could start because it started downstairs in the graphics room. Tim Stamper had been investigating the potential of using SGI machines to create graphics with for some of the future games we were going to make. And to cut a long story short, I ended up with one of the machines because Tim wanted to move into an office upstairs. And so I began building fighting characters because all I wanted to do was make a fighting game, which I eventually did, fortunately. But around about that time, we got the Sega Nintendo battle, the rivalry going on, and Sega were boasting their new Aladdin title, which featured animation from the Disney animators, and it looked incredible. And we had told Nintendo, who owned a sharing company at the time, that we'd been looking into this 3D graphics thing, and we'd got some stuff to show them. And so they came over and they looked at a demo that I put together with Tim of some fighting characters that were moving around on a gymnasium background that Tim had bought, and they loved it. And they had a meeting, and Tim came into my office that day after the meeting had finished, and he says, "They love it. We're going to go out for a meal now, but we'll talk to you in the morning, go home." So the next morning, there was already a fax, I think, on my desk, a web of faxes, and I've actually still got them at home. And it was lots of pictures of Donkey Kong, and also Donkey Kong Jr. And Tim says, "Yep, that's right, I want you to build this." And I just couldn't really believe it, but I was also kind of annoyed, because I wanted to continue making the fighting game characters. So I didn't really read too much into it, so I just built a character, and it just sort of went on from there then, and then it kind of grew and grew.
Right. Well, shall we? I'm going to start with before settling on Donkey Kong Country, right? There were a few alternative pitches. I've got Donkey Kong and the Golden Bananas and Donkey Kong versus Super Wario. Greg, talk us through these.
We were trying out different ideas, and I think the one with the Golden Bananas was largely what it became in the end, that the bananas were the thing that was the key thing that was stolen. But before that, I can definitely remember, like, Nintendo went, "Do you want to use the Donkey Kong character?" And it was like, "Yeah, we'll use that." So we just thought, "Oh, can we get loads of other Nintendo characters in there as well?" So we hatched this idea that, I can't remember it quite now, but I think Super Wario had invented a time machine or something like that, and I think he shrinked somebody and stole them away, and then Donkey Kong had to get them back. But Nintendo didn't want us to use all the other characters, so unfortunately Super Wario had to fall by the wayside, and we ended up with just going back to the Golden Banana thing.
What was it about that pitch then that worked, do you think?
With the bananas, compared to these days, it's an incredibly simple pitch. I mean, there's a big stash of bananas that gets stolen, and then Donkey wants them back. I mean, it's not exactly Tolkien, is it? It's pretty simple, but games like that, you didn't really need a big story there. You just needed just enough to kind of get the player motivated. So we just thought, what do what do gorillas and monkeys like? Oh, they like bananas. Let's just have a big stash of banana that gets stolen. There's always no reason, like, I don't think we even had a reason why the Kremlins wanted the bananas. They just stole them, and then Donkey had to get them back.
It's a hard-hitting story. I've got some pictures here that you sent, Greg, of you in your office. I think that's you, Steve, isn't it? And that's Greg's. Is that your station?
Yeah, that's my workstation. I think that was just after Donkey Kong when I was working on Diddy Kong, so that's why there's a picture of the Red Road up there and a lot of model characters. So you can see it's the height of technology in 1995.
How big was the team, Donkey Kong team?
12, 13. Yeah, I think we're going up to maybe like somewhere between 12, 13, 14. I think you can count the signatures on that image in the bottom right. So if we were at the time, that was a huge team. Like up to that point, like if they'd got like 4 or 5 people on a game, that was massive. So to put together a team of 12 people back in 1994, that was a real big deal for us.
The team size should have been a lot bigger, really, but we had a core group of people on the team that would work crazy hours, and not being made to work crazy hours, just absolutely loving it. And if it wasn't for that effort, we'd have missed that all-important Thanksgiving deadline. It probably wouldn't have come out till like summer next year. So yeah, the team size we're really punched above our weight, I think.
So you were talking, the game's visuals was obviously iconic, how it looked and how incredible the visuals looked for the Super Nintendo. What was it like using those advanced machines? How did you pull that off?
We were kind of left to our own devices, really. I think we had about 1 set of manuals, because the manuals were huge. We had about volumes of about 10. There's the rendering, the animation, the modelling, loads of different sort of volumes that you had to sort of forage through to try and find why this and that wasn't working, or how to do this and that. And we haven't had any training, and there wasn't any internet that you could look up and Google how to do this. There wasn't even any magazines that you could look up. So we were kind of in the dark with everything, and so some of our techniques were probably left a lot to be desired. I think some of my models I remember one actually. I built Donkey Kong, and if you can imagine the joints in your fingers, when you build your CG model, you have to set all of your joints and align them so that they rotate around a certain axis. And it wasn't until I got to play Tonic, as I'm here now with Steve and Mark, that they mentioned your bloody Donkey Kong model, Kevin, because to begin with, I don't think I either gave him too many or not enough knuckles. He had 2 knuckles, two knuckles, and also I put the joints in a place, and then I rotated them, and then it told them to freeze them, which meant that when you rotated them, they rotated at a very peculiar angle. And these guys, I handed it over to those, and so they had to do this cowboy model that I built, because I didn't know what I was doing. They just wanted something that looked great for the CES demo, and it did. It looked great when it was tiny. And that was the thing that we'd never really experimented with. I've done a little bit with that on Battletoads, on the arcade machine. I made the balls that rotated towards the screen. We had some sprite scaling going on, and I rotated a small loop of rotating balls, so that they rotate like 15 degrees, and then it repeated, and when they scaled, they looked like they got bigger. And then I made a model of a ship which kind of banked sort of a little bit, which the 3 toads were moving along. And so that was the first sort of test that we did to try and get the 3D models into 2D sprites. But then once our software guys had started looking at algorithms on how to reduce the amount of colours and scale it down, we kind of knew what worked, didn't we? So, I mean, you took it onwards from when I handed the graphics over to you, I think.
Yeah, like Kev says, the learning curve was absolutely huge, coming from like doing little sprites to this brand new 3D tech. And yeah, I mean, I had Tim and Kev to learn from, but they were obviously like going in cold. They had like, it was just such a steep learning curve, but the payoff was absolutely massive, it almost, once we got used to what we were doing and the things we could do, it kind of, it almost felt like cheating, like we had such a massive advantage. And, you know, you can see from the result of the graphics what the end result was.
Let's talk a little bit about that, Kev, the iconic look of Donkey Kong, which we ended up with. These weren't the ones we ended up with. How many tries did it take to get the modern Donkey Kong?
But the pictures of the ones on the left there, they're actually by an artist called James Wyman, who actually I think he works for Warhammer, it's a very great fantasy artist who worked at Rare for a while. And both of us were sort of throwing out concepts. But Tim kind of liked one of the designs I did, because I don't know whether it was because it was a little bit of a nod to the Battletoads or not, but I did the Battletoads characters a few years earlier than that. And when I received the fax to say we need to redesign this character, well, it's an 8. What do we do with that? And it's a biped, and it's got to fit into some kind of square surface area so that it would work well as a platform game. And I was still thinking along the lines of an NES game, so I made it quite chunky. And I basically just put Battletoads' eyes on this 8 character. And we sent the pictures over to Nintendo, and they said, no, we quite like that. Can you put a tie on him? That was it. So I put a tie on, and I built the model after spending some time looking at some VHS videos of apes, which people kept in the basements in the US. It was quite depressing, actually. But then we discovered the zoo, which was only sort of 5 or 6 miles up the road, and so we would take regular trips up there to go and study the animals, which didn't always work so well. So we spent most of our time studying Chris Sutherland, I think, and how he walks up and down the corridor. But there wasn't a lot of thought going to Donkey Kong, I have to admit. I basically just put the Battletoads' eyes onto the character, and it worked, so they liked it. And the Kremlings, they were actually, there was a game that we were working, was it called Eddie Stobart?
Yeah, it's called Eddie Stobart versus the Kremlin Armada or something like that.
That was right. We did some crocodile characters on that, and we called them the Kremlings. And because they were already in the bag, it kind of worked well as a jungle villain, so Steve developed those, and took those to the next level, and developed K. Rool. And so yeah, the character, it was interesting to see the universe sort of expand and all these characters sort of come together. But of course, the one thing that actually pulled them together was that CGI look. We'd all just draw on post-it notes, wouldn't we? The tiniest little scribble, but once you put that into the CGI, they all kind of gelled together and it looked right. So
Kev's concepts were always a lot better than mine, and I was pretty rubbish at 2D in those days. But as soon as he got into 3D, that's where the magic happened, really. And people are always asking, you know, is there any concept of all these early characters? And there really isn't, because if anyone saw it, it'd be so embarrassingly bad.
the best ones were actually James. James could actually draw.
And is that Miyamoto's picture with the tie?
I'm sorry?
Was that Miyamoto that drew the Donkey Kong with the tie?
Yeah, I mean, they were. I have a fax, and I keep wanting to put it on the internet and share it with everybody, but I guess it's not really my material to share. But I look at them, and I still actually prefer Miyamoto's design to the one that we did. But I'm not used to seeing it now. That is Donkey Kong.
So you mentioned a little bit Nintendo had some feedback that really liked what you did. How involved generally were Nintendo in the development of the game? How
Not a lot, really. They were really good. They basically left us to our own devices. I mean, if 2K was my property and I'd give it to somebody else, I'd be keeping an eye on them. But Nintendo, they just left us largely to our own devices. I think the only time they wanted to see something I remember was we got like a couple of levels done, and they flew us to Japan. They basically asked us to come. I think it was more of a, you need to come and show us how you're getting on. So we went over to Japan to show all the top people at Nintendo. It was all very formal and civilized. And largely they really got what we were trying to do. I think there was a few people that were maybe a little bit taken aback by just how radical a change the graphics were to what they were used to. And I think one of them said something like, I don't think people are like this, the graphics are too 3D, it will confuse them. Effectively, people like Miyamoto, Mr. Takeda, and even Mr. Yamauchi that saw it, they all saw it and then kind of understood that this was going to be the future of what video games was going to look like. So we got a little, we didn't get a pat on the back because the Japanese they didn't do that kind of thing, but we got the nod of approval and then we came back home again and basically carried on with it.
Great. David, obviously your music, the Donkey Kong theme is iconic now, it's still being used with the characters. But how much freedom did you have? How much involvement did you have? The other people having your creations?
Pretty much the same. They just let me get on with it. Left me in my little cow shed. I used to work in a converted cow shed, all on my own, Billy no mate. So I just got on with it. I did a lot of the research into it, finding things to sound jungly, and handed it over when I finished. Fortunately, they liked it.
Let's talk about Donkey Kong's moves. You mentioned you went to a zoo and it didn't help, and then you just watched Chris Sutherland. Is that how you settled on what DK was able to do?
Yeah, as Cav said, the first thing we did was went to a zoo and we had one of those old-fashioned kind of camcorders, and we thought, right, we'll go video the gorillas to see how they work and run. And then we just put that in the game, but they didn't do anything. They just
sat there.
Yeah, they just sat there doing nothing. And then when we did work, they just kind of dragged themselves along the ground. And we thought, no, this isn't good enough. We can't have this. So we thought, right, we're going to have to come up with our own way that Donkey moves. And it took us a long time to get it. We tried all sorts of things. And I think the way Donkey moves is a cross between a horse and what else was it?
It was mainly a horse. I remember writing on the disc, it was the 7th attempt I took to Chris, because in those days you'd have to copy the files onto a PC, onto a floppy disk, and then you'd take it to the programmer to put in. So I put on the disc, number 7, horse run, because I'd had enough at this point. I was so pissed off at not getting this right. And then we put this thing in called horse run, and it actually looked pretty good. So we went with that in the end. But there was some dreadful attempts. It was like, I remember, Greg will remember one attempt. It was like a cross between a leapfrog and then as Donkey hit the baddies on. No, this is more of an attack, but as you hit them on the head, you come out of it and you do a kick. But it was such a terrible move. But we did try it for a couple of days, didn't we? Yeah, the attack caused us more trouble than the movement. Like when we got the movement of the horse right, the next thing was like, what's Donkey's basic attack? And we had all sorts, like Steve mentioned the leapfrog. We had him spinning round and round with his arms out. I think you can see that one. The leapfrog was by far the worst though. But I think there was at least 10 goes at it, and every time we put one in, poor Steve had to do the animations every time. And I think it was Brendan that used to put them in, and every time we put it in, we had a cassette player of all things, and we had a track by Queen with Another One Bites the Dust, and we used to press play when we'd gather around and look at it and then realise it wasn't very good, and we'd press play and then we'd play the Queen song Another One Bites the Dust, and then poor Steve would have to go off and have to have another think about what's the next one. But eventually when we got with the roll, and that, it was like, why didn't we just come up with that in the first place? That was the right idea, but as with game development, you often have to go through that process of eliminating all these ideas that you think are really good at the time, but when you try them, they're just dreadful. And then eventually you hit upon the idea that works, and then you just go, why didn't we get to that sooner? Because these animations would all be done on the spot. So sometimes it wasn't until you'd done all that process of getting onto the disc and the software engineers had put it in game with all the proper movements on. You knew instantly then whether it was going to work or not. But when you got it on your SG computer screen, just animating on the spot, you think, oh yeah, this looks amazing. And as soon as it got, so you could actually control it on the Super Nintendo, it was like another head in the hands moment and back to the drawing board. So that was a new skill that we had to learn too, because previously all we did was animate everything from the side, two-dimensional. You draw
however many frames, 8 frames for a walk or a run or something. Suddenly we've got all these joints to contend with, a camera to position, the lighting to decide for, and then when you did animate something, everything had this incredibly robotic look to it because it hadn't got that stop frame feel that you've got from hand-drawn animation. And so it was kind of a real, I don't know, it was just a new skill to learn that was really quite difficult, and it took a little bit of a while to master that, didn't it? So
I'm sorry for conjuring up bad memories. Well, just a little bit about, I know there's one of the moves there, I think the leapfrog move that you didn't use. We also, though, we've got a bit of DK Junior on this slide. Well, talk us through the second character, and why did it end up not being DK Junior?
Well, we wanted it to be DK Junior, that was our whole idea. The second character didn't exist to start with, it was just Donkey, but then we wanted our version of how can we give the player a second chance if they got hit. And obviously Mario got its shrinking character and growing character, and we didn't want anything like abstract on the screen, like showing you like any kind of energy bar or anything like that. We thought the graphics were so good, we didn't want any UI on screen at all, so that was our kind of our thing to try and keep the screen free. So we came to the conclusion that the extra hit or the extra character, it had to be a character in the game, so that's where it started off as Donkey gets a second character with him, so it's almost like a companion coming along with the adventure. And then we thought, well, the obvious choice is Donkey Kong Jr. But then when we took a look at what Donkey Kong Jr. was, it was like this like little thing with a nappy. We just didn't think it suited the game, so we thought, okay, we'll reimagine Donkey Kong Jr. in the same way that we reimagined Donkey Kong, and that's what Diddy Kong was. And then we showed that to Nintendo, and I think they were a little bit shocked that it was a little bit too far removed from what Donkey Kong Jr. was. So we said, oh no, that can't be Donkey Kong Jr. So we just said, okay, that's fine, we'll call it a new character, and that's where Diddy Kong was born.
And you designed, you were behind the Diddy character as well. And was there any, what was the thought process in that?
I basically ripped off the Cocoa Pops monkey. I was just about to get back into my Killer Instinct characters, and Greg comes over and says, we need another one. And really, and all he said to me was, it's got to have a tail. And so I thought, how can I make this monkey look interesting? I think that was the thing, to tie him in with, pardon the pun, the tie on DK, to make them look like they had some degree of intelligence, we gave them clothes. And so I gave them the cap, and then a red t-shirt, and I was going to give him a spoon as well, bowl. But no, it kind of worked well. I mean, he looked quite a cool character. He read well on the screen, and he went on to have his own little universe and everything. And so, quite proud of Diddy, but
Diddy wasn't his first name, was it? We wanted, I think we wanted Dinky was our first choice name. But we had copyright issues with the people that make the cars, the little toy cars. So we really wanted Dinky because it kind of rhymed with donkey, and it was just like, when we had to change it, we thought, well, that's really clever. And then the legal people said, no, you can't have that sort of alphabet. So we had to come up with something else. And I think I remember having a sheet of names, and some of them were quite good, and some of them were absolutely awful, and some of them we couldn't even print on paper because they were rude. And then we all just like, we came to the conclusion that Diddy was the best next choice, and that's it. That's where Diddy Kong came from. But
that's the creation of Diddy. Well, I'm very going to quickly touch on this because you sent me loads of pictures of post-it notes of level designs. Is this how you made levels?
Yeah. It wasn't initially. I started by trying to draw them on paper, but as soon as you made a mistake or you wanted to change something, I was either having to rip it out with an eraser, and then after a while, the paper got so like crumpled and creased, or to start ripping, and I was making so many different corrections to the levels and trying to cut bits of paper out. I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. And we had some post-it notes lying around the office. I mean, it was a long time ago, so post-it notes weren't what they are now, where they're everywhere. And I just thought, could I use those to make the levels? So if I made a mistake or wanted to change something, I could literally just throw it away and redraw it. Or if I put one of it, one bit in the start of the level and I wanted to move it, I could literally just pick it up and move it to later on in the level, and that's where it was born. So I had to kind of convince a stationery manager at the time that I needed like thousands of post-it notes to design this game, which didn't go down well because post-it notes were quite expensive in those days, but it was an invaluable tool for me to be able to like draw things and everyone to look at it and go, yeah, this is what the level's going to look like.
Well, let's stick with levels for a bit. There's a load of pictures here. We've got the tyres, got the ropes, got more ropes, and I believe we've got platforms, moving platforms. We've also got some barrels here as well, obviously iconic barrels. Where did the idea for all of these come from?
Initially it started with, we were just trying to look at what was associated with gorillas or monkeys in general and go, what are we associated with? Or down at the zoo, the gorillas were hanging off a tire on a rope, so that's where the tires came from. The barrels themselves came from the old Donkey Kong games where Donkey would throw the barrels down on top of Jumpman or Mario, whatever his name was. Then after that, we quickly ran out of ideas because there's only so many things. So then we just started expanding it to like, what else could we do? But the core things, I mean, I think the barrels were probably the iconic thing in Donkey Kong. As soon as we hit upon we're going to use barrels, and it's like, what could we do with them? We came up with all these ideas, and it just kind of ran from there.
Well, let's talk about there's a barrel level. Let's talk about minecarts, shall we? Now, where did that come from?
That came from I was a massive Indiana Jones fan, and there's a great scene in Indiana Jones 2, the Temple of Doom, with a minecart, and I was an absolute fan, in love with it. The rest of the film, maybe not quite as good as the first one, but the minecart scene is amazing. And we had it on Laserdisc, which is the thing when you have a CD and a DVD, so the thing was like, a Laserdisc was like this massive thing, and we had an equally massive Laserdisc play that you put into it. And I just watched it over and over again, just watching the minecart scene and the action of it. I thought, we need to do something with that and turn that into a level in the game.
It's become a staple of the franchise, I think. Would that surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, everything surprised us. I mean, we were just, I think a lot of us were just happy to be working on a game like it, and we've got no idea of, is this going to work? Are people going to buy it? Like, what are we going to like? And initially, you could probably see if you can read that tiny scroll on the text, the minecart levels are going to be a lot more complicated than they ended up. But we ended up simplifying it quite a lot, and I think that was the right decision. But we still have no real inkling of, are people going to enjoy this? Like, which levels are they going to like? Which ones aren't they going to like? Because we didn't really do a lot of play testing. Amongst ourselves, we'd play it and go, yeah, this kind of feels all right, but we certainly didn't release it to like players and to get their opinion. The first time people would play it would either be when we went to a trade show, or most people when we actually released it, and then we'd listen to feedback and go, oh, we should change that, or yeah, we got this right. So we didn't really know what was going to work and what wasn't.
Here's a minecart level. In fact, we've got quite a few levels here, I think. Oh no, yeah. But David, when it came to your approach to creating music for each of these different levels, I mean, what was it? How did you approach the music?
Well, I've just come from working from the 8-bit system, and I've been given 64K of memory to play with. So it was like chalk and cheese. From it sounding like a doorbell, suddenly it started to sound a bit like music. But 64K isn't very much, it's about 400K, less than half a second. And that was the entirety of the memory I had to work with. So I had to be very efficient with what I used, and I wanted it to sound pretty. I wanted it to sound like the synths that I was using. And there was a thing called the chord wave station, and I basically borrowed the architecture from there. It uses really small samples, but if you put those samples together in sequence, you start to get a lot of detail and a lot of movement in the sound. And for music, that
movement is music. And so suddenly I had a new palette to work with, and it meant that when I was looking at these fantastic sounds, I could start to get instrument ideas. So if it was from the jungle, I could use a lot of drums, a lot of bird noises, marimbas and things like that, and I could actually get them to sound like the instruments that they should have been, and then give them a bit of extra life as well. So all of the levels that I could see had their own iconic sounds and their own kind of movement as well. So it was like, for me, it was like a big playground of musical sound to work with. And, it was just having fun, really, with the levels that I was given.
Did you realise you created one of the greatest music of all time when you did the choral music?
I didn't realise for at least a year, and probably many years after. It was really when OC Remix came out, and they'd done all of these remixes online. And at the time, we didn't have good internet. It was very slow. So I had no idea for years that it was as big as it become. So I was very surprised to see or hear all of these remixes that people had done. It wasn't until I read an interview, I think that the guy from 9 Inch Nails had been talking about the aquatic ambience music, and he thought that was quite good, so I was quite revved at that point.
But Steve was not a fan, is that right?
Well, yeah, apparently not. It's a bit of an embarrassing story for me, but we'll go with it anyway. It's not Grand Coco Miyamoto's trousers down level of embarrassment. We'll go with it anyway. So yeah, I thought the water music was a bit too sedate. I was expecting something a bit more upbeat, like an underwater version of DK Island Swing. So I was saying to Tim, I don't think the water music's right for the level. And Tim's, he's probably given me enough room to hang myself. He says, why don't you write Dave a note, to tell him about it. I'm sure he's having a good laugh about this. So I wrote Dave a note and left it on his desk, giving him a few music pointers for his underwater music. His great magnum opus, there's some young folk criticising him. And he wrote a note back, and he was quite gracious, as I remember. Basically, reading between the lines, it was like, shut up, you young fool, you don't know what you're talking about. So,
yeah, I'm sure they've got the exact.
Well, no, but yeah, it's an amazing tune. I think it was just because it was so different, and I wasn't expecting it. Dave knows I'm a huge fan, and thankfully, he was telling me last night he doesn't remember the notes. So
yeah, I have no recollection. It was 30 years ago, so I have absolutely no recollection of this story. But I was chuckling about it last night.
Let's talk about the creation of the Kremlings. Then, they came from a different game. Were there many things you changed about them in the creation of the?
There were a few existing concepts, but I remember at the time I either wasn't aware of them, I didn't really reference them. I used more of the kind of, the look of DK and Diddy, and just the sort of the more naturalistic look of the environment. I didn't want them looking too cartoony, really. And Greg also was very good. Greg doesn't get enough credit for the little sketches he does, so he probably did little sketches for all the characters. I don't know if we've got any of those slides, but I'd be able to reference those as well.
And those sketches with this big soldier hats on, I think. We went down the route of you knew that they wanted to look protected from the top and stuff, so I think you went down the soldier route, didn't you? But yeah, you kind of took control of those.
Obviously, because Greg was kind of writing all the abilities, he also usually did a little accompanying sketch as well, which is very helpful. So I wouldn't head completely in the wrong direction. And often when you see these early characters, scaled in quite big renders, they don't look the best. As soon as they were scaled down, and on the Super Nintendo with all the sort of the 3D rendered look, it really did look great, like nothing else.
Greg, you sent these pictures across. What's this? What's going on here?
I think there's some old ones from what's the name, Frizzle. Yeah, definitely. I think this was halfway between the old concept, aren't they?
Those are by Guy Miller, I think.
Well, I think they are. There were several versions of the Kremlins, either from the previous concept that we were working on that never went anywhere, and then turned them over to Donkey Kong. So I think that's just 3 sketches that were potential ways they could have gone, which, as you can see, they didn't go down that direction in the end. They went down a far more slightly militaristic kind of thing. So King K. Rool was in charge, and he had his kind of minions. Yeah. So we went down that theme in that game, and in the second game, it all turned to pirates. So we just wanted a theme to hold them all together.
You love pirates. Well, I'll quickly move on to animals. So what made you want to add animals you could control and use?
Yeah, they were just, we were looking for like abilities to give to Donkey and Diddy, just to add some depth to the game, and we didn't want to go down the same route maybe as other games where the characters had the abilities themselves. So we thought, what could we do that's different? Something that kind of fits in with the game. And I think it came from an extension of the thinking of giving Donkey Diddy as a companion. We thought, what about if we went another step further and we got both of them companions and they were animals that we could find? And as soon as we hit upon that idea, it was like, right, so what animals can we have? Rambo the Rhino is definitely the first one. We can see some of them that made it, some of them that sadly didn't. There's like an early version of Espresso at the bottom and an on guard there, but we certainly didn't have the elephant, not in the first game anyway. And then the grasshopper ever made it into anything. The frog, everyone's favourite frog, that maybe wasn't the best control system in the world. So it was just like a load of ideas of like what animals could we do and what could the creatures do to help.
How did you decide on what you went with and what you didn't?
I think largely like what could they offer the character, the player that was something different and it was possible for us to do. So as much as we like I personally like the digging Mo, but that would have required us to have a completely deformable terrain, and there was no way we were going to be able to do that in the time we got. So we just chose, it was a combination of ones we liked, having different types of them, and also ones that we thought players would take a shine to. A couple of years ago, I received a package through the mail from somebody that I used to work with at Rare that managed to salvage a lot of the old scribbles of some of them, and I think there was Winky the Frog, Winky Steve, and there was a few different designs on Espresso, and they remained quite faithful to the characteristics and the design that Greg first came up with. I mean, it was a no-brainer to have an ostrich as a fast-running animal, and they all had their characteristics that we wanted to put into the game. But just every time we look at it, we see it's quite a charm to all of this sort of kiddie-looking sketches that we saw. But like, they're too embarrassing to put on the internet. They're just so awful. Well, I wasn't. I was on the internet, so I have no shame. I think Randy was probably the first 3D character I did, but I thankfully had Kev's really nice concepts to work from, because I know Rhinoceros. Yeah, Rhinoceros. Yeah, I think without those it would have been a bit overwhelming, having to learn the new 3D tech as well as the concepts as well. So I did get a good start with some of Kev's concepts initially. I'm not sure we have time to talk about the story and the world that you built. Was there much thought that went into it? I mean, as you can see there, at one point it was really complicated. I think I got a bit carried away with what we could do, but then realised we didn't actually need all of that. Or we only had a certain amount of time to build the game, and it's like, where could we put our time where it was going to be the most effective for players? And having this massive story with this fantastic kind of really complicated islands, some things we just had to not do, and that was one of the things we decided. Let's do more creatures, more levels, and the story, let's just make that as simple as possible just to get people in the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about some of this stuff in a second, but when the game was finally revealed to the public, what do you remember about that at first reception?
Yeah, it was just incredible. I mean, we knew by the way it looked compared to other Super Nintendo games that
that we were going to get a great reception, but it was. I was always a little bit worried that someone might beat us to the punch. I mean, we'd heard that that Shine, who'd done Aladdin, were also working on something called Earthworm Jim that looked really cool, and it did look cool. But it couldn't hold a candle to like the world of DK. So when it was, when it was unveiled at the CES in Chicago, it was such an incredible moment that people really, because there was talk of Nintendo's next console and the partnership with Silicon Graphics, and people generally thought that when they saw DKC, it was for the next console. So when they said that, oh, you'll be able to buy this on the Super Nintendo in November, people just honestly they couldn't believe it, and you don't really get a chance to pull off shots like that anymore. I don't think.
I can remember sitting in the ones announced at CES, which was the event before it was E3. They showed it on screen and it got this massive round of applause, and I was just sitting there saying, I was just thinking, we've got to finish this by November, and it was June, and I was absolutely bricking myself because I knew we'd still got half the game to do. So as soon as we finished drinking our complimentary beer at the Brothers while we were over there, we flew back home and had to really, really knuckle down to try and get it finished for November, because that was the magic slot to release it. But even when it came out, I personally got no idea whether it was going to be a success or not. Like, there was no previews or early release or anything like that. We just released it. We went into the shops. There was no digital release. It was just physical copies on the shelf. And it wasn't until probably weeks or months afterwards that we actually got some sales data come back and actually we realised actually it was still okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had the full force of Nintendo's massive advertising power behind it, so they really put everything into it. I mean, seeing all this merch here, I mean, unfortunately, the team, a lot of the time, we weren't even aware of this. We were just so focused on getting the game done and getting on to the next game. I mean, sometimes we used to see a few little bits came through, but we didn't, especially like the Japanese stuff. I've not seen some of this stuff before.
Yeah, I haven't either.
It was a lot of it was brought on I think we went to the Japanese show, Shishinkai, was it, back then? I don't know, but I basically went around all the shops, hoovering up as much DK stuff as possible, and as Steve said, we hadn't even seen this, even the development team hadn't seen this, so I went around the shop and basically spent my own money to buy all this merchandise, because we were just proud of what we'd done, and then took it home and stuck it in a box, and then fetched it back out again to take some pictures of it. I mean, the chocolate bars you saw a little bit earlier, they're still opened. So they've got like a best before date of 1994 or something like that. I don't dare try one.
It's incredible. How did it feel to see all your characters up in all this merch?
It was incredible, just going and seeing it in Japan. And I can remember going, might have been a year after when we were working on the second game, we went to Japan and we saw the Donkey Kong characters in one of the crane grabbing machines. And it was like, yeah, wow, this is really cool. So we were trying to win it, and we couldn't win one of our own characters. But the guy that was operating the arcade, being very Japanese, he wanted us to win. So he kept coming in and unlocking the cabinet and moving them around, so we stood a better chance of winning our own characters that we'd spent money to do. But in the end, we managed to win some of our own characters and went home with them.
We had a little bit of a similar experience with the Battletoads, because they made some Bendham toys and a little bit of merch, which was always our intention to have our own IP, because up until the Battletoads, I don't think Rare had anything which was a flagship IP. And then when this came along, and it had a unique look to it, and as Greg said, we weren't really seeing it in the UK, but if you went on a trip or you looked in the magazines, you've seen all this merch. It's here, it's arrived. It's technically not our IP, it's a Nintendo IP, but it's amazing to see that it still looks the same almost today as it did 30 years ago.
Well, it's still the same character designs this day. Obviously, we've evolved it a bit, but it's still the same music. It's the
Made into Icross.
Yeah, exactly. It's where it all began. Well, we're actually out of time, and I really enjoyed that. So sorry, if you do want to have a chat with the dev team, though, great news. They will be over in the meet and greet area in 15 minutes after this session. But that's all we have time for. Please give a warm thank you to Greg, Steve, Kevin, and David. If you are a fan of Rare, as I say, the team will be available to meet in 15 minutes. At 2:45 on the centre stage with the Sea of Thieves panel, where we get updates about Sea of Thieves. And if you're a fan of Rare Games and Kevin and Steve, they're talking about UK Quayle on the Platinum Suite in room 1 at 4:45. So hopefully we'll get to see you at some of those. Thank you for listening.